Bruno Chieco, who is the Quebec Liberal Party's Youth Wing's regional president for Montreal West. He wrote immediately after, I must say I'm significantly opposed and dissatisfied with the PLQ's decision to support the PQ motion severing ties with the monarchy here in Quebec. I understand Quebec is a unique and distinct society in the Canadian Confederation, but the gravity of our times requires bold action and support from our partners, domestic and international.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to say, I believe the vote today betrays the PLQ's federalist principles, very
Agreed.
much in sync with what you were sharing with us. And aligning yourself with a separatist party's motion is in itself disastrous.
Agreed.
More to come. So welcome, Bruno. How you doing today?
How you doing? Thank you for having me here. I appreciate that.
Alrighty, so let's just remind folks of the tweet that you posted as regional president.
Yeah.
The rest of the tweet, in which you say, quote, I believe this vote today betrays the PLQ's federalist principles, and aligning yourself with a separatist party's motion is in itself disastrous. Do you think there was a use to this vote in particular in this motion, and why do you think the Quebec Liberal MNAs did not abstain or even vote nay against this motion?
It's tough. It's tough. It's really tough to approach this because there's so many different possibilities to explore, and I'm not in the head of these M&As. And I'll start with your second question. But, a lot of Quebecers are against the monarchy, which I do understand. I can understand because Quebec in itself, and as I mentioned in my post, it's a unique and distinct society within the Confederation, within Canada. And we have to acknowledge that, and that's the reality of things. That's fine. But we have an issue. And the issue is that we have a hostile US president, Donald Trump, who continues to infringe on Canadian sovereignty. And right now, what is the strongest proponent of Canadian sovereignty other than Canadians, other than the new election mandate that the federal Liberals have received, and that would be the King of Canada, who is our head of state, who has all these connections with different Commonwealth nations, whether it be the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, whether it be Australia, whether it be New Zealand. These nations are independent from one another, but they each have their respective head of state who acts in his respective capacity in each of his different quote unquote realms. So I look at it and I look at the motion yesterday and I ask myself, I go, why didn't they abstain? Okay, or why didn't they vote nay? I can understand, a lot of Quebecers are against the monarchy. I understand that, but now's not the time to just look at that aspect, although it is important. The people's will is always important, but it's to look at Canada as a whole. It's to look at the country and what's happening to the country right now. It's continuous attacks on our sovereignty. And the person who promoted our sovereignty, the person who defended us, the person who gave the throne speech for the first time in nearly, 60 years, was our head of state, King Charles. So I could understand. I think that maybe they would have voted for that motion because of polling and because the consensus, or at least a majority of people in Quebec, support the abolition of the monarchy. But is it the right thing to take and support a motion of a separatist party when you, on our own party, the PLQ, is a federalist party? That in itself is contradictory and counterintuitive.
So I do think courage is best demonstrated through action. And in this case, it was quite different. The action was really not in tune with the raison d'etre of our in fact, the oldest party in Quebec history, I might add.
Yeah.
And at a time when we were looking for a Captain Quebec or Captain Canada, so to speak, figure in our leadership race, the one thing that did unite us is our survival as a country versus the consistent threats of domineering Trump. Okay. And I do think it was really ill-timed,
Yeah.
literally the day of the king's visit on top of that.
Yeah.
Like it could have, waited a month, or something like that. And it's not one of the
Absolutely.
top 10 priorities of Quebecers either.
I agree.
And one of the things that really surprised me is how everyone, not a single nay vote, was registered or took place. Basically, you share that exact sentiment. At a time of national unity, this should not be the stance of the only Federalist Party left. Well, of course, there's the newly formed Quebec Conservative Party as well, that I do think is still for
My
federalism as well, last time I checked.
my stance
So,
on that one can also, double-edged sworded. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I am not. I will always stand up to any sort of Quebec bashing. But that also means that I'm not going to respect anyone that's going to be doing any other Canadian or provincial bashing outside of Quebec as well. Meaning a Quebecer that's going to be Canada bashing or province of Ontario bashing for that matter. I think it's cheap and it's uncalled for. But even when it's coming from the National Assembly, it's almost embarrassing. It 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 kind of says, well, we're chewing on the hand that feeds us. Now, don't get me wrong. You can have an opinion on the royal family. That's fine. But what if, for example, you're making fun of the institutions that hold us together, which is the crown. We have our own crown. The crown represents our institution that everything is stemmed from our legal system to our Westminster system. So to come out and on the same day that the king has made a presence in Canada and to have this vote, which is clearly an opinion, it's just there's just no other better way of saying it other than I think it's wrong, and I think they know that. So the better question is, what's your motivation? What are you trying to do? It almost looks like the tantruming baby. The attention's not on Quebec today, so we're going to tantrum out while the king is here. Could that be a question?
and also, it's through actions that you show whether or not you agree with a monarchy, right? So you don't have to be left or right ideologically in order to demonstrate that. Is this a sign of the Quebec Liberal Party's lack of courage, or rather their abstinence, right?
That is an
Or do you
excellent
believe this
question.
was, in fact, them demonstrating that taking a stand matters to Quebecers, whether or not it is something you agree with?
Well, then, if this was something that they don't agree with, you should take off your platform that you're no longer a federalist leaning party. Call yourself a nationalist Quebec party for that matter. But if you're federalist, you're making this very confusing.